Hello, everyone. Welcome to the EA Global Summit 2020. We are in day two, and we've had a really great day one with some fantastic sessions. This is Nizam from the EA Global Summit organizing team, and we have Mr. Karan, who is a technical lead software development at Infineon Technologies Private Limited, with us. And he'll be presenting on model-based software architecture and design for embedded systems. So this is one of the great presentations, and we've seen some really good interest on this. And Karan has been with Infineon for a while and is going to take us through the journey of software development at Infineon using Sparks EA. And for any questions or discussions with Karan, please feel free to join our team's channel if you haven't done already. The link to the channel will be shared in the chat window. And any questions or any further details that you need, you please raise it in the channel, and we'll also request Karan to answer a few questions towards the end of the session, but he will be available to interact with you post the session and throughout the summit. So with that said, I once again welcome Karan to this session, and thank you, Karan, for joining us. Over to you now.
Thank you, Nizam. Let me share my screen first. So I believe my screen is visible and I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, very clear, and we are able to see your screen. Thanks, Karan.
Okay, so let's start. So welcome everyone. And today I am here to present a session on model-based software architecture and design for embedded systems. And first of all, at the onset, I would like to thank Spark Systems and Spark Systems India for providing me this wonderful opportunity to connect with EA practitioners and maybe some developing EA enthusiasts also. So I would have loved to meet a lot of EA practitioners in person, but given the current world situation, I think it's best that we do it in a virtual conference in the safety of our homes. So on the session would largely revolve around software development for an automotive microcontroller. But the topics that I would be presenting would in general be applicable to any software which is developed for a specific target or a specific microcontroller. And maybe some of the topics are also in general applicable to software development. So having said that, let's start. So Infineon, a world leader in semiconductor solutions, that's precisely in one line. If I would have to summarize Infineon Technologies for you, Infineon has its presence in industrial power semiconductors, digital security systems, and obviously a large part in automotive semiconductors. A little bit about myself. So my name, as already Nizam said, it's Karan. You can address me as Karan. I work as a senior staff engineer at Infineon, and my role is that of technical lead for software development. I have been using Enterprise Architect for almost 4 years now, and it's been almost every day that I use Enterprise Architect for something or the other. Other thing, I live in Bangalore and I work out of Bangalore. Yeah, that's pretty much about me. Let's move over and have a look at the agenda for the today's session. So before I talk about the agenda, the overall idea for today's session is to tell or showcase how model-based development helped Infineon software to develop an efficient, automatized, and a tool chain kind of an environment with Enterprise Architect. The idea is to show all of you a big picture of our overall solution and not go into very specifics and details of specific topics in EA like document generation or automation interface of EA. We would touch upon them, but the large idea is to see the solution, how we created a sustainable environment for us and look at the possibilities. What we did is important, and I'll also show a little bit of how we achieved it. Having said that, let's go through the agenda. So I'll give a brief project overview, what kind of a project we are executing, so that you can relate to the remaining part of the presentation. What was our motivation, objective, and strategy for making such a change around 4 years back? And then comes the main part of the presentation, where I go into the actual solution, what we have right now, where enterprise architect is the central part. And I would also give some details on this solution in the slides. Some conclusion and some next steps. So we look also towards next step as how we can enhance our solution and make it better and more productive. Let's see if the session ends in time. We can do some Q&A here. Otherwise, as already there is a Teams channel, and you can find me there after the session is over. So let's begin with the project overview itself. So Oryx. So Oryx is a well-known name in automotive. Basically, it's a microcontroller which combines the power of a RISC processor, a microcontroller, and a DSP into a single microcontroller. And it finds itself largely in automotive and industrial application. So the project that we are going to discuss is software development for this Oryx series of microcontrollers. The software is in-house developed in Infineon, and obviously the microcontroller is also from Infineon. So this is the key context of our discussion. So when we talk about an automotive software development, you cannot leave out standards. So, and we will not leave out standards for Infineon software development also. The software development in Infineon is largely influenced by automotive SPICE. And since the software we develop is a safety relevant software, ISO 26262 is also applicable to us. To comply to these standards and to give a software which is very robust and efficient, there are a lot of need to develop specifications. And we develop significantly large number of specifications which are very detailed, and you need to comply with the standards, so you need to make them detailed. And when you have detailed specification which span over multiple documents written by multiple engineers, written over multiple sites, there are chances that over time you would see inconsistencies creeping into your specifications. And this inconsistencies make your system really inefficient over a period of time. So the idea and goal for us was to bring up a software development environment which is sustainable and efficient for the developers, as well as the output that we generate, basically the software that we deliver. So having said that, we moved from a document-based software design and architecture into a model-based a few years back. And let's see what were our goals and objectives that we set that time, and where we are with respect to the solution at this point in time. So as you would have already realized by now that our key motivation to go towards a model-based design was to ensure consistency and quality across our software artifacts. Apart from this, there's always a mandate from ISO 26262 to use semi-formal notations, and UML is a best fit there, I would say. And also make our software development efficient, so that once you have a machine readable software design, the scope and the limit is limited by your thoughts. So you could extract anything possible out of the design and do something meaningful with it. So having this motivation in mind, we set some objectives or goals for us, that we wanted to have this complete software design in a model in one single tool. The general practice is like you develop something in Visio, you develop something in other tools, and then you bring them together in a Microsoft Word and make a document. So these processes are really inefficient. The idea is to stop thinking about software design as a document, rather think of software design as elements and how these elements are connected together to create a system, and how the logic of the system works to provide the functionality that you are looking for. The other key goals for us was primarily that we should be able to generate still the specifications as documents, because we have a tool chain and we cannot disturb the tool chain by introduction of a new tool, and it should work well still with the other tools that we have. The other key objective is that we should be able to verify our software design against standard guidelines. So whenever you make software, you have some guidelines on these guidelines can be standards, or these guidelines can be your internal ones. And once you have something as a design which is machine readable, you can also automate the verification of such kind of a design. So this is a pretty obvious slide. So of the tools available in market, we went ahead and chose Enterprise Architect by Spark Systems for our development. Many reasons involved behind it, a lot of reasons already known. The kind of automation it provides, the kind of tool it is, the kind of GUI it has, it all kind of suited well for the things that we were looking for. Then I would move towards the strategy. So once we selected the tool, we wanted to build a strategy, and our strategy went in an approach of a concept, prototype, and deployment. So for the concept, we engaged a lot with Spark Systems India here because of a simple reason. We wanted to learn about the tool fast and see if the tool can be deployed for us. And we realized that if we want to learn fast than the natural pace of human learning, it's best to consult the experts who know about the tool and who know about modeling. And we found the partners with Spark Systems India here. With Spark Systems India, we discussed a lot about EA features. We explained them how our software is, how our documents are, and how they could help us to transform this document-based software architecture and design into a UML-based modeling elements, and how these elements can be connected. So we had a lot of brainstorming sessions during the initial phase. And this is the first thing that I can mention went on really well for us, because we had the expertise in software development and the microcontroller, and Sparks had significant expertise and past experience in doing such transformation. So the knowledge which complements each other is the best kind of collaboration you can do. So this went on really well for us. Once we could finalize how things would be done, we went into a prototype mode. Any standard engineering practice, you need to provide a proof of concept that things work, even though it's proven multiple times, but you still need to provide it works. So our approach for prototype was to do a significant part of the software and not just a prototype for the sake of doing it, so that we see all the use cases and we are ready when we actually deploy it in a live project. Again, here we worked a lot with Spark Systems to make a sustainable prototype for us. Now, obviously, when the prototype got successful and we were ready to deploy it, there was a bigger challenge waiting for us. And this big challenge was that we needed to still deploy it to a very big team. And deployment to big team, again, could bring in inconsistencies. Now, this is a different type of inconsistency, which I am telling is basically Spark Systems provides you a lot of flexibility with Enterprise Architect. And when you are doing the modeling, there is a tendency that you can go wrong. When I say go wrong, there is a different way of doing the same thing. And if different engineers are doing the same thing in slightly different ways, the objective is again kind of lost. So this was an even bigger challenge to deploy it to a big team of around 40 engineers working together. So first thing we did is we set up a MySQL database environment for collaborative working. So instead of having an file-based system, we organized trainings for the team. So this trainings was a little different mode of training. Obviously, we had classroom sessions, which, if I am correctly remembering, ran over 2 weeks, a week or two, with hands-on. So engineers did do some part of the modeling during the trainings, but in the end, it's a training. It's a dump of information from one trainer to 40 trainees in a room. And obviously, when you get out of the room, if you are able to remember 25% of what was told, it's already a good training. But this would be a big loss for us, because if engineers are not sure what to do with the model, it would be a catastrophic end to the solution that we have developed. So what I did here was, we created small recordings for each software element that we wanted to model. So it's like a 5-minute video on how to model a software unit or a software interface. And whenever the engineer wants to model a software interface, or rather when the engineer forgets how to model a software interface, he need not run around. He can just look at a video for 5 minutes and the memory is refreshed. And the visual memory is far more stronger than the audio memory that we have. If you see something, if you practically see how things are being done, we show how an interface can be modeled, how you can add an operation into it, how you can add parameters into it, what kind of tagged values you're supposed to use with the interface. If you put this in a 5-minute video for all the elements that we have and make a curriculum out of it, this was something which really worked well for us, and it's helping us even today. If you have a new colleague joining in, yeah, you already have kind of a curriculum ready, and it becomes easy for someone to start the work. So yeah, the other thing of the training was that a lot of people who start with Enterprise Architect would think of it as a fancy Visio tool, uh, which in my perspective, you as a trainer, you need to break that. And it's not a fancy Visio or a paint tool. It's a model with your elements and connectors, and how you should reuse your elements and not create new ones, not create duplicates. All this need to be passed on to engineers who are working on a model-based environment for the first time. So this also was a key part of the trainings that we did. So moving ahead now, now comes the strong part of the presentation today, where I put forward to you the solution that we have right now. And this is it in a image. So this is a busy slide. I will be here for a few minutes and try to explain each and every part to you. And before I even start, so this solution that we have today as of date has evolved over time. It was not like this on day one. It has evolved, and it will keep evolving. The reason I say this, the more we learn about the tool, uh, the more we want to do with it, and the more we want to introduce things into it. When we look into our future steps towards the end of the presentation, we'll see why I say that this solution will keep evolving. So let's go on this slide now. I'll go from your left to right, and basically I have organized this slide as you have some inputs coming in from the left, you have in the center the Enterprise Architect MySQL database, and you have outputs towards the right. So let's start with the MySQL database. So we went with the approach of hosting the model in a MySQL database as SQL tables rather than having an EAP file. So we have a big team, and our model is also significantly large. So this is the best solution recommended by Spark Systems also for big models and big teams, and also supports a lot of collaborative development. When I say collaborative development, I largely point towards multiple developers working together. And this database basically holds everything: your UML model, obviously the modeling done by the engineers, your MDG technology, your scripts for your document generation, your document templates. Everything is kind of packed together in one database put together. Now coming a little bit on the left, towards the left side. So on the left, we see inputs which are specific to Infineon, but in general, I believe this would be applicable to anyone doing software development for this kind of an environment. So the first key input for doing this kind of a software development for us was the microcontroller. The heart of any embedded system is the microcontroller, and everything kind of revolves around this microcontroller. Even the software largely revolves around the microcontroller. Yes, you have a lot of application software, but software that Infineon does largely revolves around the microcontroller. So we already had the hardware model. When I say the hardware model, the microcontroller itself available as a model in a different tool within Infineon, and we just needed to extract this information and put it in the UML model which was used for software development. So what does flow from a hardware model into a UML model which is for software development? So the key part which interests software development for embedded is the special function registers or the SFRs available for any microcontroller. And this was one of the key information which flew in from the hardware model through a DLL that was done by us into the UML model. The second big thing which influences the software is your software requirements, which define how the functionality or the behavior of your software should be. And for us, the software requirements are done in JAMA. And we followed a similar approach here where the requirements, once they are ready and available, they are extracted and placed into the UML model through a custom DLL again developed by us. Now on these DLLs, I have a separate slide where I go in a little bit more details on this. Now you have your inputs ready. You have your hardware model inside the enterprise architect. You have your software requirements inside the enterprise architect. What is remaining is you need some developers who could utilize these information and generate a software design. And this software design now is done according to the trainings and the meta model and the MDG that we have defined for the developers. And with their magic, they create the software design within the UML model. There is one more role involved here, which I put here as admin. When you have so many things which need to work together and work well, you have an import for the hardware, you have import for the requirements, you have scripts, you have document templates, you have a generator which should work fine, you have an MDG technology. You need one central admin who could manage all this and see if these things work seamlessly. And this is a really important job that needs to be done, because if things start to go a little bit divergent, it should be brought in control by this role. That's why I put this here towards the center. Talking a little bit on the outputs. So you see Jenkins here. This has been a really new addition to us. Till now, we were not on the Jenkins setup, but now we have moved to a Jenkins setup where our outputs are primarily generated from Jenkins. And if you look at the outputs themselves, there are a different variety of outputs that we generate out of Enterprise Architect. All have a specific need and a specific reason why we generate them. The first two, obviously, the architecture and design specification was our initial goal, that we should be able to generate architecture and design specifications as document. But over time, we realized that we have created a data center or a warehouse for software design information. I like to refer to one of the sessions yesterday from Ian, where he said, the more information you put in your software model, the more output you can achieve from it, or you can integrate it well with a lot of other tools. So that's what we realized, that it's just not the architecture and design specifications. There is a lot more information which can be used for different kind of analysis or reporting or integrating the EA tool with the other tools. So you see now we have information flowing in from different tools, and also information flowing out and integrating with different tools. I will explain these outputs, what they mean and how we generate them further on in the slide. But the key takeaway I would say that is, if you design a robust solution, it would eventually become a data center for you, and you would like to feed in more information into it so that you can automate more things, or you can generate more stuff out of this model. And since your source remains one for all the information, if I would say a golden reference source in a UML model, your things are very consistent. If there is some mistake, you need to come and correct mostly in one single place. Yeah, so let me move ahead. I will go a little bit detailed into each and every part now. So the first part that I would like to highlight is the MDG, and let's see what we have here for the MDG. So what I would say is that we developed our own MDG technology and we did not reuse any of them. And I would say that was a good decision for us, because over time, we did realize there will be many special cases needed for adding some specific tagged value or extending some of the meta classes of the connectors or the elements themselves in a specific way, which is very specific to your project and your style of doing software design. Also, for a large team, when you have a large team, possibilities of people making mistakes is high. So using your own MDG toolbox with a given set of diagrams, a restricted set of tools, a restricted set of elements only reduces these possibilities, and you achieve a lot of consistency due to this. The other key thing we used from Enterprise Architect was the model patterns. So whenever you do a software development project, you do it in phases, and we also do the same way. And you keep on adding software modules as part of the same software that you are building. And when we add these new software modules, we want it to be consistent with the existing architecture. So we created a model pattern for a module. And whenever you need to create a new module, basically just use this model pattern, and with a click of a button, you have a module ready with its structure. And once you have the structure ready, it's significantly easier for someone to develop the model. So it's like a Kickstarter if you want to add a new part or a new software module into your project. For the behavioral diagrams in the software architecture and design, we stick to the native UML, because the native UML diagrams for state machine, activity, and sequence diagrams provided by Enterprise Architect are significantly exhaustive, and it's very difficult that any of your use cases would not be met out of these UML diagram. Okay, going further. So some of the key takeaways for this MDG is, one requires a good knowledge of your product, which I definitely believe if you are going to do, you will have, and you require a good knowledge of the UML also, so that you can map the correct software elements to the correct UML types or the UML meta classes. Even though you extend the meta class, but you are able to map it properly. Even the connectors, when to use a realization, when to use a generalization connector, when to use a composition, when to use an aggregation. These things can get a little complicated. So that's why I recommend a good knowledge on the UML is also necessary along with your product knowledge. Another small thing which really helped us was the quick links. It saves a few seconds per connector that you draw. And given that we draw a lot of connectors, you save a lot of time. So you don't have to go to the toolbox all the time. You just draw a connector between two elements and you will get a list of drop down indicating what are the possible connectors between these two elements. It also kind of stops you from making a stupid mistake. Another thing for reducing inconsistency is the use of UML types for enumerated list. Generally, when you add tagged values, you want to have fixed values associated, a fixed set of values associated with these tagged values. So you prepare them as an enumerated list, and rather than user typing in or keying in the values themselves, they can select one out of the possible options, and that makes it consistent that everyone in the modeling environment or every engineer in the modeling environment selects from the same set of possible options. Needless to mention that you avoid stupid spelling mistakes or case sensitiveness of elements which may impact your scripts and generations later on. A thing on MDG, which I realized significantly late, what that you can define an MTS file for generating MDG. And I would say generating MDG is not so simple. It's a little bit of a tedious process. And for me, I felt really good when first time I was able to generate an MDG. But over time, you learn how to do it and it is smooth. But I would definitely recommend that go for an MTS file. It kind of reduces a lot of your time to generate the MDG. You can do it in a little bit faster way. Moving on, the MDG itself is very flexible. So defining the MDG process itself is very flexible. You can define any number of stereotypes you have. You can associate tagged values to them. You can associate your toolboxes to diagrams. So all these basically help you to achieve consistency. Now, if I have a diagram which is relevant for architecture, you would only get a set of elements which are relevant for that diagram. And when you're putting the diagram together, you should not make a mistake of bringing in unwanted elements. Again, this is not a 100% foolproof mechanism. You can always change your toolbox and select some new element, but it kind of provides you a guideline immediately that, yeah, if you're creating a diagram, then what kind of tools I should be using associated with it. So that's on the MDG. I'll move ahead. So next part that I would like to touch upon is the MySQL database itself. So we hosted the database on a VDI. You could also do it on a server. So we did it on a VDI, and it has not given us any trouble till now. And we connect to it via an ODBC connector. The other thing which about EA that I can mention here is that there are a lot of privileges and element locks that is managed by EA itself. You can restrict what kind of operation a user can do and what kind of operations an admin can do. One simple example is the user must be able to run scripts, and admin must be able to modify and create new scripts. So these all can be easily managed within Enterprise Architect. On the elements locks also, if you have a very big team, then I would recommend that the entire model stays under a lock, and or the entire model is in an uneditable mode. And if you need to modify an element, you need to acquire the lock, do the changes, and then go ahead and release the lock. So this kind of protects part of model from unintentional changes. Like, for example, the hardware model and the requirements that I mentioned in the beginning, once they are imported in the model, obviously the users can use them, but no one is allowed to change them. One of the major key takeaways I would say for this database approach is that you should host the database on a network on which the developers would work. From this I mean that geographical location of the database server and the users, if it is same, it's really fast and efficient. And even though if it is not the same, modeling is not a challenge. Modeling would still be fast and efficient even if you are working from home, as we are all doing now. We did not see much challenges towards modeling. We connect remotely, we connect to the database, we do our modeling, things are more or less fine. But if you are running scripts and if you are running generators over WAN, the logic is all the communication happens through MySQL server based on queries. And this could be really slow at times. And this is one reason which forced us to move to a Jenkins-based setup where all the generations are done in a Jenkins environment on a VDI, which is on the same network as the database server. Doing it over a WAN or internet connected remotely makes it a little bit a slow and tedious process. I would recommend that everyone should go for this Jenkins kind of an approach. The other big challenge we have is when you have a database approach and you have a software project which is running, which would definitely have a CM system, kind of merging them together or baselining your model in the CM system at different points of time for different modules become a little challenging. Although we developed a solution around it, which I will explain later, but something better here would be really good. Other key benefits are that the login is managed through a Windows user account. You don't need to create special user IDs and passwords in Enterprise Architect for enabling users to log into them. If you are connected through your Windows login account, you could seamlessly log in into the tool also. And the changes done by one user is reflected to the other user instantaneously. That is one of the key advantages also that we see here. Going a little bit on the import side now, how we manage the imports. So we had a simple logic for both the hardware and the requirements, that we export the requirements and the hardware model as XMLs, and we wrote our custom DLL so that we could import them inside Enterprise Architect. Now, one key thing is this import needs to be synchronous, especially the re-import needs to be synchronous. So what we do is we wrote our scripts in such a way that we import based on requirements ID and the hardware element IDs, and not based on EA goods or something. So next time when you re-import, you kind of match these IDs between the XML and EA, and you try to re-import on top of the same element. The advantage is when you re-import on top of the same elements, the connectors that you have drawn from those elements or into those elements stay intact. If you create a new element every time, then you have a lot of rework to do. And the requirements and the hardware model also change over time. It's not that they are fixed and then only you start the software development. And we use basically C# for developing these DLLs. Key takeaway is that use the EA object model to create, delete, modify all your elements, connectors, diagrams, basically whatever a user can do manually with a click of a mouse button, you could automate. And the import logic that we have is purely user dependent. So the logic that I said here, that we want to import on IDs and how we want to delete elements, how we want to create new elements, all lies, the logic completely lies with the user. He has to use the appropriate EA APIs at the correct time. Now, with these imports of JAMA requirements and the hardware model, we were able to achieve complete requirements traceability within EA using the modeling links. So this is one of the key tasks for an automotive software development, is to achieve complete traceability. And this was really something which worked really nice for us. It reduced a lot of effort, and the integration with other tools also we were able to achieve for the traceability. So the documents which went out of Enterprise Architect integrated with other tools contain specific tags which could be read by the tools used for traceability. The other key thing is the hardware software interface. So whenever you are doing an embedded software for automotive or something which revolves around an embedded microcontroller, there is a lot of talking with the hardware. The software needs to interact with the hardware. And this, with the hardware model into the Enterprise Architect, we were able to represent very cleanly and clearly, and also helps us to generate a lot of outputs. Yeah, the key benefits I would say is that EA automation provides a variety of language through the DLLs. And with EA15, although I have not used this, I know that the DLLs can be embedded into an EA project. I have not used it because not moved to EA15 yet, but I read in forums, yeah, this is possible. Moving on. Let's have a look at the output. So before I go into the outputs, let me explain in this slide itself what kind of outputs we have once more. So you have these documents here generated as architecture and design specification. We also have a data analysis document. This is basically an analysis of access of all the hardware resources and all the software variables in one single report, so that we could do some kind of a concurrent access analysis for these to avoid data corruption during runtime. We also do a custom model export XMI. So this is not the standard XMI export for which is available through Enterprise Architect. What we needed was to baseline a module in Enterprise Architect, in a module from Enterprise Architect in a CM system. And to do this, we need a module, which is a package, and we also need all the elements which the module is dependent on. So basically, we run a script logic, which takes the current module, exports it as a package, and then also goes ahead, exports all the dependent packages, and tries to give the user one single XMI. We also have two outputs which interface to other user documentation, to other tools like for our user documentation and also for our unit testing. So we already have an interface into the unit testing from Enterprise Architect. Yeah, I kind of explained these, but nevertheless, let's go through this once more, that the document generation of engine of Enterprise Architect along with its templates, I would say, is substantially exhaustive. It's possible to generate documents which is hard to differentiate if it's a generated document or a handwritten document. You could generate variety of outputs to the C# interface. You could generate Excels, you could generate XMLs. One of the key items that we enhanced ourselves recently was use of this task factory for multi-threading. So if you are running these scripts, there is a possibility these scripts could take a lot of time. So we saw how we could generate multiple threads for faster processing. If you're processing a set of elements, you could process all of them together or a set of them together rather than going in steps and processing them one by one. This significantly reduced our time of time for generating the outputs, specifically this custom XMI export, where you have to parse over a lot of elements. You could parse at them in a multi-threaded environment so that your speed is actually increased 3 or 4 folds. One of the big troubles we saw, or I could say a caveat that we saw, is the system output or the scripting output cannot be rerouted through automation interface in Enterprise Architect. This gives you certain troubles when you are running a Jenkins-based setup where everything is automated, but you can circumvent around it through some possibilities. I'll move ahead a little bit, a minute on the conclusion. So basically what we have right now is a single development environment for software developers where he has all his requirements, his hardware data, static and dynamic views, and his end-to-end traceability from his requirements to his design in one single tool. You don't have to leave that tool. Everything is available for you inside the same tool. We built up a tool chain with JAMA, our hardware model, our unit testing framework, and our user documentation framework. So this also gives us a lot of efficiency. So all this combined together gives us consistency and efficiency between the artifacts that we produce, whether it's internal artifacts, which are architecture and design, our analysis reports, or documentation which goes on to the user along with our software. This is one line where I would like to spend a minute more, is you need to spend time and effort to create a robust environment. I would not say that this was done with a click of a button. You need to spend a lot of time, effort. You need to give a lot of thought process when you want to create such kind of an environment, especially for a large team. And over time, it's only over time that you will realize that the gains that you have from such a setup exceeds the initial effort that you spent on creating that. A little bit on the next steps. So for one of the key next steps for us is improved configuration management for EA, mostly with Git. There are some things we are doing about it, but nothing very concrete. But this is definitely one of our wish list and something which we want to achieve. We want to move into a Python-based model parser and generator. So Python is a widely accepted language across Infineon and also across industry. And we want to move a lot of our things to Python-based generations in our next projects. One of the first output would be the C code generation using Mako templates. So you parse the model and you feed the information into a Mako template and you generate C and header files. To what extent? Yeah, the header files at least completely, and C files may be parts of it. Model validation. So a lot of rules we have, also both the modeling rules and the internal guidelines should be able to validate them again using this Python based model parser. So this would be something like an overnight run. You give it on Jenkins, and in the morning you get a report which parts of the model is healthy and which parts of the model is not doing so good. Last but not the least, we want to integrate more towards the unit test and the enterprise architect. So whatever unit test framework we have, we've realized with a little bit more input inside enterprise architect would help us to generate the input data for all the units of the C code. So basically for each function, we'll be able to identify what kind of input data should be provided to it. And then writing the test case remains with the test engineer. So with these next steps, I think I'm also a little bit over time, a minute over time. I leave you with this slide, and for questions, if there are any now, I can answer, or over the Teams channel also.
Thank you very much, Karan. It was a fantastic session, and I think us and most of the practitioners who are attending to this session knows that this wasn't built in a day, and it's several years of efforts and experience that you have consolidated and given it in a very curated form to the users. And there's a lot of learnings here. There's a lot of good steps and pointers here. I think it was a great session. There are a few questions. We have requested them to be, made in the teams as well. But I guess like one of the questions, what is JAMA? I think it's relatively easy. Do you want to give it a go? Like there's. Yeah.
So JAMA is basically a requirements management tool, and we do our software requirements in JAMA. You can do a Google search on JAMA software and you would find what is JAMA. So I put the icon specially here so that if you land up in a different page with the icon, you can realize. So it's basically for requirements development that we use JAMA. For stakeholder requirements, for software requirements, for product requirements, all types of requirements.
Yeah, thanks, Karan. And as you referred to Ian and various other sessions as well, like every aspect that you have mentioned here, like MDG definitions, automation, scripting, there are individual sessions which are elaborating on that as well. So in Teams, we will add some more references. For instance, you mentioned about model add-ins in EA 15.
Yes.
There is a session on model add-ins coming up tomorrow, I believe. That's obviously reducing the complexity in deploying add-ins. So there are quite a few other sessions which will add a few more depth to the pointers that you mentioned. But what you have given to us and to most of the EA practitioners here who are either practicing using Spark CA or who are aspiring to set up a practice, we know the kind of efforts that would have gone behind, and what we have given is a really good summary. There's another question. Is there a video that you were supposed to play? Like, I don't think there was a video. Like, there was a question says, is there a video that you were intending to play?
So no, there was no intention to play any video.
Yeah.
So whatever was the intention, I've already presented.
Okay. Okay. So we thank you very much for this. There's another question. Are you planning to do scripting in Python language in EA? Is this supported?
So what we are planning to do is we want to decouple the automation interface that we have from the EA. So we want to run EA in a headless mode with the Python interface. And yes, it's possible because we are already doing it. You can put a question in the Teams channel and maybe I point you out to some details. There are a lot of details you can fetch out from the Sparks forums. From there itself, I learned that we could do it with Python. And Python is a largely acceptable language right now. And to have developers work on Python is also very easy, and Python also gives you a lot of plugins. So we at Infineon are going beyond automotive software to use Enterprise Architect, and it's actually an Infineon-wide decision to go towards Python as a standard language for automation with EA. So the idea is we want to connect to EA in a headless mode and parse the model and then generate whatever output you need in whichever format.
Thanks, Karan. I think there are more questions coming up in the teams as well. So this question is also posted in the team, so you can add some inputs to it later on. I think we have hit the time.
Yes.
I'll leave it here, but it was a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much for all your efforts, and thanks everyone for joining this session with Karan.
Thank you everyone. Hope you have a good day and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Karan.
Okay, bye.